All right. Moving on to the next Patreon request, and this one comes from Nolan Unejo, who asked me to do a top 10 list for kaiju for non-Godzilla kaiju movies. So my top 10 favorite non-Godzilla kaiju movies, which is actually a lot harder because I decided, you know what, let's make it a little harder on myself. Let's not use any kaiju, like any film from Toho's Godzilla universe. So Mothra, Rodan, all of that. That would have been cheating. I could have done the whole list, so I decided not to. Also, there were prerequisites to like what counts as a kaiju, and maybe I'll do a video talking about that. And yeah, as always, if you think a movie should be higher or lower on the list, that's totally fine. This is just my personal top 10 favorites. Anyway, so let's get started with number 10, Gorgo. Gorgo is a movie I think a lot of people trash on because it's just British Godzilla. Yeah, that's kind of what it is just British Godzilla, and I'm not gonna decry that. I'm not gonna refute that. Gorgo is a fun movie. It's a fun movie, and while the riff tracks in MS3TK are really good at riffing it, I really enjoy like the monster action. It's a really solid monster movie, especially when we get to see Gorgo's mother just kind of wreck house in Britain. I think that's the highlight of the movie. The suit work's also very well done too. The only problem is we have a fucking Kenny in this movie, and I hate it. I fucking hate it. So, yeah, starting off, Gorgo at number 10, which I know some people would be like, really? Gorgo at number 10 if we're doing a list like this? All right. Let's move on to our next one, and that is Reptilicus. Reptilicus is not a good movie. I will, much like with Gorgo, I fully acknowledge that Reptilicus is not a good movie. It's a fucking puppet on a string being dangled around, and it's a Dutch monster movie, but I have a lot of fondness for it. I have a lot of fondness for this movie. It has a lot of nostalgia for me. It was one of the first non-Godzilla giant monster movies I watched. Yes, it's ridiculous. Yes, I do think that a lot of the monster action is goofy as all shit, but I think it's just kind of charming to me. Also, whoever thought we'd get a monster movie from Holland? Really? Like, whoever thought we'd get a monster movie from Holland? And also, it's kind of a neat idea to instead of like a man in suit, which I heard like they had an idea for like a man in suit, but then they're like, no, that looks really bad. Let's not do that. Let's try something else, guys. Like, let's legit try something else. So they decided puppet on a string, and that's kind of fun. Yeah, I also love the creature design of Reptilicus. Is it goofy? Yes, but like you don't really get to see a lot of serpent dragon kaiju in movies too. So yeah, I acknowledge this is bad, probably worse than Gorgo, but it's fun. I just like it. It's fun. Next up at number 8, Tarantula. Yeah, did you think I wasn't gonna put like some 50s B-movie giant monsters in here? You're crazy. Tarantula is a movie about a giant spider. And that's it. And that's all. The giant spider goes around, and does the face look derpy as all hell? It does, but it's kind of fun. I will say that I think it has some of the best, like, of the time, I will say. Of the time, that whole forced perspective shooting for the spider, and how they utilize miniatures and whatnot for the spider, is really cool. Like, when I think that's pretty neat how they utilize it. Is it a little anticlimactic at the end? Yes, but it's a fun. It's very much of the time. It's a nice little time capsule for the era that it's representing. It's very much here's a giant monster movie. Here's a giant bug. Go nuts with it, and it checks off all the balances. And also as an honorable mention, I would say the Deadly Mantis as well. I was very close to putting the Deadly Mantis here, but I was like, no, kind of want to have Reptilicus and Gorgo here. But yeah, you gotta have a giant bug movie represented if you're doing a non-Godzilla list, right? Anyway, so there you go, Tarantula. Now moving on to number 7. Number 7 is a recent movie that came out from Norway, Troll. Not Troll Hunter, although that is a really good movie. It just didn't meet the criteria for me for being a kaiju movie. Troll is on Netflix. It's a film from Norway about a giant troll. It does take a lot of inspiration from Godzilla and Kong Skull Island, but I will say that this movie has a lot of fun giant monster action. The effects are actually are pretty decent for a low-budget Norwegian movie. I always get excited when I hear like Norway's doing whenever there's an announcement for a Norwegian creature feature, because I feel like outside of like the U.S. and Japan, Norway seems to have that on lock, because they really love to play with their own mythology and lore. And I'm very excited for this to get a second film. I heard, like, I was so excited to hear that we are getting a second film for this franchise. That's now going to be a franchise. Hopefully we get to see the troll fight someone else. It'd be cool. Anyway, number 6, Cloverfield. Say what you want about this movie. Is the Cloverfield franchise effectively, I guess, dead? Probably. It's that last Cloverfield movie that came out of nowhere at midnight after the football game was dumb as hell. But Cloverfield itself, say what you want, Cloverfield itself, the original Cloverfield movie, was a neat idea. It was a neat idea from Abrams and the rest of the crew of having a giant monster movie told from a perspective of survivors and being caught in the middle of it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Also, the Cloverfield monster design is actually pretty deep. I really like how alien it feels. Like it, but the problem is that afterwards, a lot of American giant monster movies, and the MonsterVerse is guilty of this too, is that they really just try to make it look like a Cloverfield monster without being a Cloverfield monster. That's why the Mutos are just so fucking uninteresting to me. I'm like, they're just Cloverfield monsters, just more bug-like. There's a lot of great shots in the film. There's a lot of great tension in the movie. And again, like, if it weren't for Cloverfield, we would not have a MonsterVerse. This was kind of the inspiration to get a new Godzilla movie for America. That was one of the major inspirations for Legendary to kick that off. So Cloverfield, yeah. And I've heard a lot that they are trying to get another Cloverfield movie off the ground that's going to focus more on the original first film rather than... And I did like 10 Cloverfield Lane, don't get me wrong. But this movie was definitely a great kaiju film. And again, if it weren't for this, we probably wouldn't have the MonsterVerse. So, you know, there is that. So, next up, now we're in the top 5. And at 5th place, we have 20 Million Miles to Earth. 20 Million Miles to Earth is a great Ray Harryhausen movie. It's the design of the Ymir is phenomenal. It's a great design. It's also a great monster where it's not trying to hurt people. It's very much like the Frankenstein monster, where the Ymir is basically like, I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm scared and I'm angry. It's like an animal lashing out. It's not like an angry monster. Also, that fight. Also, we don't really get a lot of kaiju films in Italy, so that was a nice change of pace. And that fight between the Ymir and the elephant, awesome. Absolutely awesome. It's a testament to stop motion, and was also one of those big films for Ray Harryhausen to really be like, yeah, I'm Ray Harryhausen. I'll be your ass-kicking special effects guy that will inspire generations to come. How are you? All right, moving on to number 4. Number 4 is Pacific Rim. I was kind of bantying back and forth whether to have Pacific Rim in here, because it's technically more of a mecha movie than it is a kaiju film, but it did have kaiju in it, and a lot of people do consider it part of kaiju films, so I decided to roll with it. This movie is, again, like, Uprising sucked. I'm not, like, looking back on it, Uprising sucked. This was such a solid film from Guillermo del Toro. The kaiju designs were great, the action scenes were phenomenal, the cast they had was perfect. Absolutely perfect. It's a solid kaiju film, and hopefully maybe one day it will get new life breathed into it, and maybe get tied into the MonsterVerse. Maybe not in continuity. in the movies, but probably I foresee that we'll probably get a Pacific Rim Godzilla crossover from Legendary Comics. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards. Anyway, now moving on to the top 3. And at third place, we have the original 1931 King Kong. Arguably one of the greatest films of all time. Is it dated? Yeah. There's some scenes, and you know what I'm talking about, that are dated. But this is a piece of American cinema, and cinema in general. It's not just a great movie, and a movie that should be seen for special effects, how movies changed in 1933. And because 1933 was a big year for movies. You had this, Invisible Man, you had a few other movies. It was more or less like groundbreaking. It was like kind of we're pushing forward in cinema. But as a kaiju film, this was the one that started it all. This is the one that, like, if it were not for King Kong, wouldn't have anything else. We would literally not have anything. Anyway, moving on to my second favorite kaiju film. That is The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. This movie, much like Godzilla, was important to kaiju, much like King Kong, excuse me. This movie was vital for kaiju cinema. This movie was, again, the big break. This was the major breakout for Ray Harryhausen, his stop motion. The Radosaurus is a phenomenal character, is a phenomenal creature design, and that rampage scene is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It's a great movie. It's a phenomenal movie, and a great 50s movie too, and giant monster movie. And again, much like with King Kong, if it were not for this, probably wouldn't have we probably would not have Godzilla. And finally, at number 1, Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris. I was so tempted, I had to resist putting all 3 Gamera films, and they're also honorable mentions. This movie is a perfect kaiju film. If you were to ask me, like, greatest kaiju films of all time, I could never put a number 1 because I have so many. But if you were to say, like, which ones should be on that list, Gamera 3 and the entire Gamera Heisei era should be on that list of greatest kaiju films of all time. Iris, phenomenal villain. Great storytelling, great characters, great effects, all of that. What more can I say? So there you go, guys. That is pretty much my top 10 non-Godzilla kaiju films. You guys tell me in the comments below, what are your top 10? And as always, hope you all enjoyed this. Other than that, I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.